Dictionaries just tend to show that phonemic transcription, the broad transcription. It just shows you enough for you to be understood. It shows you the phonemes and it doesn't show you the allophones. So why doesn't it give you the allophones that will help you sound more native, that is really, really accurate? Well, the reason is you're listening to Accent Amazing, where we combine language, linguistics, and history to help you improve your pronunciation and make your accent amazing. Dictionaries don't tell you how words are actually pronounced. Yes, there's that transcription thing, and a lot of you, if you've looked in the dictionary, maybe it's just me, I don't know. I do tend to like transcriptions and phonetics, but if you have ever looked at a dictionary and looked at those transcriptions inside those slashes, you might be surprised to know that those aren't actually how the word is actually pronounced. It doesn't actually give you the exact detailed pronunciation. That's because, for example, a lot of my students have asked me, why isn't there aspiration? Aspiration is that little puff of air that we have in words like cat and table that you don't really have in some languages, like Slavic languages like Polish or like Russian, or in Spanish, like Romance languages like Spanish and French and Italian. So they say cara, and you don't have this ka sound that we have in English like cat. And to indicate that, linguists will use a little H symbol because that's a puff of air. When we say table and cat, there's a little puff of air. That's aspiration. However, you might notice that if you go into the dictionary, you will see that words like cat, even though we say it with an aspiration, cat, we don't actually write that little H. And the reason is because, well, that's not what dictionaries are for. They're not exactly there to help learners of English speak English with a native accent. They're there for English speakers. And English speakers don't need that reminder because these are automatic phonological rules that happen in English. They are allophonic variations. So the k sound with aspiration and the k sound without aspiration that we have in words like scatter. So you can see there's the word cat in scatter, but we don't say scatter, we say scatter. It doesn't have aspiration, and even though it's spelled the same, but the dictionary shows it as if they were the same. They just have a k and the a and the t in that word's transcription. And the reason is because dictionaries show you broad transcription. Broad transcription is a type of transcription that shows you just the bare minimum that's necessary to really be understood. It shows you the phonemes, just the phonemes. Phonemes, if you've watched some of my content or know some linguistics, are kind of like sounds, but they're not necessarily sounds. They are concepts of sounds or other features that are important and contain meaning in the language. So if you change one phoneme for another, you get a completely different word. Depends on language. So R and L, for example, are phonemes in English because lead and red are different words in English. However, in Japanese, you get sayonara or sayonara. If you say it with an L instead of a ra sound, it's the same word. It doesn't really matter. No one will misunderstand you, even though your accent won't be that good. Dictionaries only show you the phoneme because phonemes are all you need, because distinguishing these phonemes is all you need to be understood. And cat, the sound cat and the sound in scatter, those two different K sounds, one with aspiration, one without aspiration, those are not phonemically different. That is why, as a learner of English, you probably, if you speak a Latin language or like a Slavic language, you probably have been saying cat like cat without aspiration, or table instead of table without aspiration. People still understand you without problem. That's because you are getting that phonemic distinction across, and people know that you're saying cat as opposed to pat. You are clearly communicating the phonemes. Dictionaries just show phonemes typically, if it's especially if it's inside the slashes, and that's because it's broad transcription. And native speakers who use these dictionaries don't need narrow transcription because they automatically do the different versions of that phoneme, which are called allophones, the various versions of that phoneme. For example, with the K sound in English, you got k as one allophone, one version of the phoneme k. It can be k, it can be k in words like scatter, and it can be like up in words like back, where we don't actually say ka. We don't say back, or we don't say back. We just say back. and that we don't actually release that sound. So those are all different versions, but they still count as the same phoneme. Dictionaries just tend to show that phonemic transcription, the broad transcription. It just shows you enough for you to be understood. It shows you the phonemes, and it doesn't show you the allophones. By the way, if you're enjoying this and you want to listen to more, I would really appreciate it if you can follow or subscribe to this video channel or this podcast, wherever you're listening or watching it. And there'll be more. So that will encourage me to make more of this content for free so you can enjoy learning about linguistics or improving your accent. So why doesn't it give you the allophones that will help you sound more native, that is really, really accurate? Well, the reason is if dictionaries were to do that, which accent should it choose, right? You can have for example, a standard American accent might say things like boat with an O sound, an O phoneme pronounced in this O way with quite a round mouth and then it gets rounder. Oh, boat. If you're British, if you have standard British English, you might say boat. And so it starts off with an unrounded mouth with a more centralized vowel, boat, right? Rather than boat. If you're Australian, you might say bird, bird. So you have more of a fronted vowel, and it still stays fronted and rounded. So you get boat, as opposed to boat or boat. Um, and if you're Scottish, you might just say boat, a big boat. So it's kind of more monophthonized. I think. I'm not an expert on Scottish English, but I think it's something like that. So you can see already that those all count as the same phoneme, but their physical realizations are completely different. So if dictionaries were to exactly show this very accurate transcription, which by the way is called a narrow transcription, because it's really accurate, it shows all the tiny diacritics. First off, it's gonna be there's gonna be tiny diacritics and all these little marks, and it's gonna be like a real hodgepodge and messy visual thing. You got those like little things on the bottom that indicate the vowels a bit more like close, and your mouth that goes up a bit more, your tongue is more forward or something. You'll have all these rare symbols and like little superscript symbols, so it'll be super messy. Secondly, though, which accent should it choose? The dictionaries tend to try to do like a standard sort of lowest common denominator, and most English dialects have a very similar type of pattern between them. So it's kind of like relational. For example, in half of American English, like caught and caught, or tick-tock and talk are different vowels. Same with British, but in British English, it's not tick-tock and talk, it's tick-tock and talk, right? And then you might, for example, have the F vowel. So the F vowel in get is the same in standard English and I mean standard American English and standard British English, get. But if you go down to Australia, it becomes git. And if you in New Zealand, it might even be git, right? Even more closed. But we know that and are different. So you got bet and bit in British and American English, and you got bet and bit in Australian English, and you get bit and bit in New Zealand English, and they all are different from each other. So the relations, the patterns between those words are maintained, but the physical realization is different. It's kind of like algebra or some sort of math thing. I was actually never good in math. I'm a pretty bad Asian. I know Asians are supposed to be good at math, but I was pretty bad at it. But I am pretty good at linguistics. And in my university, when I did my linguistics, my intro to linguistics course actually fulfilled my mathematics requirement, so I never had to actually take the mathematics as a general requirement in university because linguistics is actually very mathematically systematic. Linguistics and mathematics and logic, for example, all count as formal science rather than natural science like physics and bio or like social sciences like psychology and sociology. But enough about that. That's back to the topic. So um, all the relations are still maintained if you do that broad transcription where you take just the phoneme and ignore the rest of the allophones because the allophones themselves can be physically different from each other. You don't need to choose if it's going to be pronounced boat or boat, um, as long as that vowel boat is different from bought. for example. In American English, you got boat and bought. In British, it's boat and bought. In Australian English, it's boat and bought. And they're all the pattern is maintained. So dictionaries want to cater to a wider audience, and they don't want to pigeonhole themselves into choosing a specific type of accent. So it's more useful. And that is why dictionaries don't always show you the exact accent details of how a word might be pronounced. And that's one of the biggest things I learned in university. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing, give it a like, give me a comment below. Have you ever noticed this? Is there something similar in your language? Does your language have different types of accents that are not represented in the dictionary? Tell me below, and I hope this was helpful. Let's make your accent amazing.